Yo guys, already signing in for my first lore vid on the Soul series that I'm producing. So excited, I wanted to put this up when the game first came out, but things came up and I'm so lazy that I procrastinated it until now. I want to discuss the connections between Dark Souls 1 and 2, which is actually a huge topic, but not much is given in-game, so beware of heavy speculation. Let's start with some of the things that my theories are built off of that are generally accepted. First, that Lordran is Drang Lake, but time has obscured the landscape into what we see in Dark Souls 2. This is evident in the mined-up crystal caves of Seath the Scaleless before the Duke, common enemies that are derived from the souls from the Old Kingdom, drops and items from those who once resided in Lordran, like Havel and Ricards, etc., and other hints in item descriptions and whatnot. But the fact that Lordran is Drang Lake are the same has been widely accepted for a long time, so I'm not going to stress it. Next, commonly accepted thing that I want to lay the groundwork for my theories to come is the cycles that the world goes through. The names change, but the idea is always the same. A ruler comes to power. In Dark Souls 1, this was Gwyn, and in Dark Souls 2, the Iron King. This ruler is then bested by a new ruler. In Dark Souls 1, this was you, and in Dark Souls 2, this is King Vendrick. Then, the choice is made to either rekindle, or you could choose to leave, and in doing so, rule over the land as King Vendrick has. But your choice does not make a difference. You can either rule or rekindle the flame. Ruling, which will send the world into darkness faster, or rekindling, which will simply prolong the death of the world. But in the end, darkness overcomes, basically resetting the world until a new flame is born, and the Lord Souls are then redistributed, and a new cycle begins. This has occurred many times over, which is evident through the NPC's dialogue and soul descriptions from the old ones, which is the most direct information on the cycles that we receive. This brings me to my first theory, that Dark Souls 2 has proven for us that Manus is Pygmy. First of all, the other souls have already been claimed. Gwyn's soul to the Iron King, the Witch of Isla's soul to the Lost Sinner, although I do not believe this myself, but it is widely accepted due to the given description, but I'll go into this in depth later. Next is Nito's soul living inside the rotten and ceased portion of Gwyn's soul that is present in the Duke's Zephrige, or however it's said, but his soul is irrelevant to Manus and Pygmy, but it is shown as evidence of the cycles, so all the other god souls have been accounted for, but the Dark Soul and Pygmy. Understand, nothing is really stated about the beginning of the ancient war between the lords and the dragons, or that it happened and Seath turned against his people. And yeah. Continuing on, in the Nassandra's soul description, it is hinted to that she is a child of the Abyss, and Manus is the father of the Abyss, so it is quite clear that not only Nassandra, but all the queens are derived portion of the father of the Abyss, Manus, which goes hand in hand with the idea that Pygmy set out to spread the Dark Soul. And what the cycles are based on is that when holding a large part of a soul is basically making you a derived version of that old enemy. But the Dark Soul is different from others, in which it spreads easily, whereas when the other god souls were split and marked a set point, those then became independent, even each smaller part returning as a new boss. Using Gwyn as an example, he derived his soul into 3 pieces: his own, the 4 kings, and Seath, each now seen in Dark Souls 2, the Iron King, Flexal Sentry, and the Duke's Spider. But the Dark Soul continues to divide, with ease through the cycles, and uses time and numbers to overpower the gods in an unknown goal, perhaps vengeance against the gods for something they did pre-war. But nonetheless, Pygmy's soul is the only one capable of splitting freely. As shown, it is the only one that has, and hence using the transitive property, we can say that the queens are large portions of the Dark Soul, and a large portion of Pygmy in a sense. Also in saying this, they are a large part, if not all of Manus, divided between the 4 queens, in which the queens are Pygmy and Manus is the queens, so Pygmy is Manus. Next topic is Aldia, and as I mentioned before, my theory on the Lost Sinner. First, I don't believe that the Lost Sinner is the Witch of Islith herself. but rather one of the lesser witches, perhaps Quelana, the one who escapes the effects of the failing to recreate the first flame. This is based off me trying to explain Aldia. He is an unknown. No Lord Soul, no item, not even souls. So who the hell is this guy? Well, I think he is a genius like Seath, but the Duke acquired Seath's soul, so I don't doubt that fact, mainly because they are located in the same area relative to Dark Souls 1. So I look to his actions to explain his character. This theory is somewhat hurt by the fact that we don't really know anything about pre-Dark Souls 1, and the fact that things do change in between each cycle. There's a ton of information that we do know, confirmed about Aldia, but only in his actions. Looking at his life, we know that he is the king's brother, essentially equal to your brother in Dark Souls 2. This makes no sense to me though. In Dark Souls 1, our mind was too destroyed to remember family, but I felt that I should include it for you guys. During the majority of Aldia's life, he was attempting to recreate a golden age, and with the military assistance from the king, he is able to recreate the dragons. So the next question I asked myself was, why did he continue? Why is he engulfed in flame during his boss fight? I have come to the conclusion that he continued to attempt at recreating a golden age, and he saw that the dragons were a mistake and not the answer to creating a golden age. And I don't believe that recreating the flame was his first attempt at destroying them. When going through Dragon's Eyrie, I noticed two things. One, that the architecture is reused, and so are the enemies. Both are very similar to Hyde's Tower of Flame, which appear to be none other than Anor Londo from Dark Souls 1. It has Ornstein's armor and his soul. The word flame, similar to what created the lords, and it is fitting to name their home after it. It too is run down like Anor Londo when we find it, but this time lacks a powerful entity to hold it to its old glory, more than likely due to King Vendrick's aggressive overtake of the land. Nonetheless, this place holds the knights who fought the war against the dragons, and although Grin's Silver Knights are not present, but the place is named after them. The Hyde Knights, scattered throughout, could be the Silver Knights. Aside from this, the giants that are the only enemy in Hyde's Tower are the same giants from Dark Souls 1, and the ones found in Dragon's Eyrie, these giants, now named Drake Keepers, are the same ones from Dark Souls 1. It is my theory that Aldia saw he was bringing forth an unstoppable force that would breed and outnumber and overpower the kingdom outside of his secluded testing grounds. He tried to take action, but it was too late, and his demons overtook his peaceful testing ground and forced him to flee. He eventually sees that successfully recreating the flame is the only way to defeat these ancient beasts, but not even he was smart enough, strong enough, or powerful enough to contain it, which links him to the Witch of Izalith, who attempted the same task, but for a different reason. She saw the dark overcoming the flame, and as it dwindled, she did all she could to save herself and daughters, and recreate a golden age. In both their attempts, they accidentally create monstrosities scattered around the lands, but mostly contained to their own quarters. Not to mention they are both coated in flame during their boss fights, and they have really shitty boss fights. This is not an opinion, this is fact. But where is the witch's dragons? Obviously she wouldn't look to those beasts to recreate her golden age, the ones that she fought so hard to rid from her land. But they do both face battles. Izalith's faced battle with Gwyn, due to her failed attempt at recreating her flame and her incapability of containing the demons that she spawned, alongside my theory that Aldia waged war with the dragons, both who which lost and are now somewhat searching for their own inner peace. And a side note, I couldn't fit this in, but both her creations appear at the beginning of the game, the Asylum Demon and the weird fat monsters that are optional at the end of the tutorial and the beginning of Things Betwixt. The next connection I'm going to make is between the giants and the dragons. I questioned this one myself, but similar to that of the Witch of Izalith and Aldia, I feel there is enough evidence that connects them, not in description but presentation. In both games, this grand war is alluded to between the present ruler and some powerful force for an unknown reason. Let me say again, there is no known reason for the war between the lords and the dragons. Ignoring the timing of the wars, they both heavily affect the game going forward, and both are seen throughout the game as decorations, enemies, and common topic between you and NPCs. I could go into Nisandra instigating the war and perhaps Pygmy doing the same before he was booted from the Lord Club, but I don't feel like that is a strong point to make. Similarly, about how they are both made of stone, but these points are not solid, and with the few things that are told about the giants and the dragons, it's hard to make connections. There's so much more to go into between the connections, and if this video gets a lot of positive feedback, I'll continue into them. About how Dark Souls 2 can answer a lot of our questions about what happens at the end of Dark Souls 1. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching. Please sub below and help me continue to improve the channel with some critiques in the comments